Good evening, everyone. My name is Joe Donahue, and like many of you, my ancestors immigrated from Ireland to Pawcatuck, Westerly area. And some of you knew my mother, Kay Donahue, and possibly my sister, Kathy Lathrop Donahue, and also possibly even my father, John. If you did know my father, John, I'd love to talk to you about it. It's been a while. I also have three brothers. My brother, Monsignor Michael Donahue, and my brother Jack, and my brother Chris, who I believe is here. I think I just saw him. Oh, he's right here. Okay, that's good. I'm part of the Irish Presence Project along with Cormac O'Malley, who's in the back over there, and Gene Fiore is over here. Of course, Larry O'Keefe is on the project. We have Kennedy Crowley Kelly. That's a tongue twister for me. And Siobhan Kelly Gordon. I'm not sure where Siobhan is. Oh, there she is. She's in the back there with Cormac. So on behalf of the Irish Presence Project, we'd like to thank all of those who have made this evening possible. St. Michael Church Pastor, Father Dennis Perkins, the Pawcatuck Neighborhood Center Executive Director, Sue Sedensky. Thank you, Sue. And the Stonington Historical Society Executive Director, Liz Wood. Unfortunately, she's not here with us tonight, but the Society's Director of Development, Chris Keppel, is here, and he is doing the videography for us tonight. And if you get a chance and you want to learn anything about Stonington history, the Stonington Historical Society over in Stonington is a great place to join and become a member. So I would encourage you to do that. It's my pleasure to introduce to you to Larry O'Keefe. His life experiences began on Stillman Avenue and at St. Michael's Church and St. Michael's School in Pawcatuck. He spent his life dedicated to the Boy Scouts of America, guiding and encouraging the youth of New England. He has traveled around the country and in Canada over 500,000 miles, carting hundreds of children with him, imparting life experiences along the way. After many years as a middle school teacher in Burlington, Vermont, Larry has returned to Pawcatuck and continued to lead the Boy Scouts and share his historical expertise of St. Michael's. You might know Larry as the author of the wonderful stories of the donors of and those memorialized by the stained glass windows of St. Michael's. Larry is also one of the people who made a huge contribution to the 150-year anniversary book of St. Michael's. So Larry's credits are quite large. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Larry O'Keefe.
Thank you. First, I have to clean up my junk. These seats are available. That was my junk on the seat. There's plenty of room up front. There's seats in the middle there. You don't.
Oh, one other announcement. Could everybody make sure their cell phones are off, please? So that we don't have disruption. Thanks. Minority was smart.
We got a good crowd here. I recognize a lot of faces. I'm related to many of the faces. And it's good to see you all. I'm going to start by telling you that we had a set of display boards that I had all set up that I was going to use to reference throughout my program, and we have lost them. We couldn't find them. So I put together sort of a makeshift one, but everything on it is too small for you to see from any distance. The others, there was big blow-up, so you could actually see them. So that's thrown me off a little bit, but I think I can hang in there and somehow recover. We also have made handouts for a lot of the things that I will make reference to. And Kathy's over here, she'll take care of that for you. So if there are people who are here together, we'd appreciate it if you would take one handout between you in case we don't have enough to go around, and share them with other people. Okay, let's begin. I want to talk today about the place where I grew up and where my family has been for generations. It's a place that many people call Downerville. When I was growing up, we called it Downeyville.
Yes.
How many of you remember calling it Downeyville? Anybody? Oh, all right, I'm not the only one. And as a kid, I used to wonder where it got the name Downeyville. Well, there was a Downey family that lived there. And they lived on the corner of, I think, Smith and Robinson, somewhere in that area. So as kids, we just assumed that the place was named after the Downey family. It was a lot of years later that I learned how wrong I was. It was definitely not named after an Irishman. I'd like to start by defining what is Downerville. There are basically two Downervilles. One is the old original Downerville, which sits smack on the top of Berry Hill. Anyone ever heard of Berry Hill? Yeah. The top of what is now Liberty Street used to be called Berry Hill, named after the people who owned the hotel on Liberty Street, the Berry Hotel, which is still there, by the way. It's a blue, I think, well, the last time I looked, it was a big blue house sitting next to the Pizza Ladies building. And that was the Berry Hotel. And that's what the hill was named for, was the Berry family. Most of the land in the 1840s was undeveloped. There were a few houses here and there. There was a dirt road that went up the hill and continued on. It was called the Voluntown Road at the time. It's now called Liberty Street. And most of the land from what is now St. Michael's Parish and School all the way up to Thompson Street belonged to a man named Dr. William Robinson. And he died. Fortunately for us, he died. Because when he died, he left his son-in-law, George Downer, as the person who was the executor of his will. And George decided to dispose of the property by cutting it up into plots and selling it. So, Kathy will pass out to you the first set of sheets we've got, and I will try to point out here the boundaries of Old Downerville.
So one person, you could just put up a hand per girl.
On
That'd
this,
be-
these are, you're going to get two sheets. You're going to get this one and this one. This one, I'll show you where these came from, by the way. This is a map from 1877 of Westerly and Pawcatuck. And on this map, you can see Downerville,
Do you want me to hold it for
Stillman
you?
Avenue, St. Michael's Church. Joe will hold it for us.
You can
And-
point to it if you want.
Okay, it's all in here. And what I did was I just copied that and I blew it up. And you're going to have the sheets that will show you what it is. Okay, so
You're
put it
good?
down in the chair or something.
Good?
Yeah.
Yep.
So the boundaries of the first Downerville section were from Robinson Street to Thompson Street, Liberty Street coming down, and what was called Cross Street at the time, which is now Robinson. And that rectangle was the area that was originally called Downerville because it's the area that was owned by Robinson, and George Downer sold it off in plots. He never lived there, but he was apparently very affable and very friendly, so the people who lived there named the place after him. They just called it Downerville. It extended a little bit when John Morgan, who was a banker, bought the land that ran from West Broad Street to Liberty Street and created another street coming across called Morgan Street. He and the wealthy people took the end by West Broad Street, and he sold off the end by Liberty Street to Downerville people. So basically from the dip in the road on Morgan Street up to Liberty also became part of Downerville. And then in the 1880s, the Pendleton Hall family, which is the group that owned everything from Robinson Street down to the river, they decided it was time to sell off their land. And of course the Irishmen rushed in to buy that. And although I don't have a handout for you for that, this is what happened here. In the 1880s, all of these lots were sold off. And Stillman Avenue, Cherry Street, Lower Robinson, Lower Garden Street, and Walnut Street were developed. Almost 100% Irish in that area. So by the time it was done, they've all got handouts now, right? Okay. You don't. We got any left?
Nope.
No?
Let me grab one from,
Okay.
If you could share the handouts, it's helpful.
Yeah. Look on with somebody else or something. All right. This picture right here shows you old Downerville. So it's easy to identify. It's the one picture you got that's in color. Okay? This one is very interesting because it tells you the names of the people who bought the lots and built the houses. So you can actually see in 1868 who actually owned those houses in old Downerville. And then the other one you have is the list of names of the people on that map in 1868, the list of families who were actually on there, and I found more than just the last names for you. So those are the boundaries. That's what we're talking about. Everything from Thompson Street to the river, Stillman Avenue, everything from Robinson Street out to Liberty, and a little bit of Morgan. If you live in the area, you know the area I'm talking about. If you don't live here, you're confused. Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about Dr. Robinson and George Downer, because they figure pretty heavily in this story. Dr. Robinson, his name was William Robinson, and I'm not going to be able to do this. Trying to keep it here so I can see if I'm running out of time. There we go, I got it. His wife was Margaret Downer, and George was related to the wife. So George and his development hit at just the same time that the Irish Great Hunger was pushing all sorts of my people and probably some of your people out of Ireland and over here. The two dovetailed. The timing was just right. The Irish needed a place to live. He needed to get rid of the lots. So he began selling them off quickly to Irish immigrant families. Initially, before that, almost all of the Irish lived over in Stonington Borough. And they had come with the railroad for the most part, or they were fishermen, but most of them were in the borough. And they were not great in number. But when they came after the Great Hunger, or the famine as most people call it, it wasn't really a famine, they came in droves, huge numbers of them. And they poured into our town. So they began building homes. Some of them were built by the Maxon brothers, who were contractors, and some by the Pendletons and the Halls, who were contractors. A lot of them were built by the Irish themselves. there were a lot of Irishmen, and Tom Higgins was one guy who built a whole lot of the homes. And there was a term that the builders used to use back in those days. They called it acres barns. There was a contractor, a builder in town named Acres Barnes. That was his name. And he was an outstanding carpenter. He did beautiful, perfect work. So if somebody else was building something and they were really proud of it, and they felt that they had done an outstanding job, in the middle of what they were doing, they'd just yell, "Acres Barnes!" And everybody came running to see what it was that they were so proud of. So the story was that once Downer sold off all of this property, if you were going up Voluntown Road, you'd hear Acres Barnes all day long, coming from people who were pretty proud of what they were building. Now, where do these people come from? Well, this is interesting because people who are immigrants, particularly people who are leaving because they were driven out by something, try to stay close to people of their own kind. I mean, that's always true. That's still true because that's where they're comfortable. They share a culture. They usually share a religion, a language. So they clustered together. They also came in clusters because they would be driven out and they would look for some place where there were people who were familiar. And if you came from Ireland, you didn't just look for Irishmen, because as far as the Irish were concerned, a Kerryman was so different from a guy from Donegal that they didn't even consider each other Irishmen. If you were a Kerryman, you went looking for a Kerryman. So we had 3 clusters, and I think Kathy's in the process of giving out papers. And they're up here, and you can't possibly see this, but you're going to get a map of Ireland. And on that map, you're going to see 3 areas with circles around them. So when you get it, take a look at it. Those are the 3 areas, the clusters, where the majority of the people in Downerville came from in the beginning. County Longford, in the middle of Ireland, was one of the places where a great many came from. Names like Farrell, Fay, Holiday, Hughes, Kane, Keegan, Keenan, McGlynn, McGowan, Smith. These people all came from Longford. I see a Longford person over there. Your family, Keegans, came from Longford. The second area is down in the southern end, right on the border of County Cork and County Waterford. And there was a big cluster of people that came from that area, also to Downerville. And those people included families with names like Colbert, Conway, Cronin, Crowley, Donahue with an A, Doyle, Haggerty, Higgins, O'Keefe, McGrath, or McGraw as they called it then, Morrissey, Morrison, Roach, Sisk, Walsh, and many others. And they came as a cluster. The third area is over here on the very tip of County Kerry, very end. Mostly from the island of Valentia and the area around Port McGee, which are adjacent to each other. A lot of people sitting in this room are probably descended from some of those Kerry people. And they included names like O'Connell, Connors, Donahue, with an O, Driscoll, Hussey, Kelleher, Mahoney, Murphy, Savage, Shea, Shagrew, Sullivan, Trant, and many others. And you should have, in that last handout, you should have a sheet like this one, which actually gives you a lot more of the names than I just read. It tells you a lot of the names of families that came from those areas. Now, why did they come here? First and foremost, they came here because their people were here, and they clustered here. But they also came here because there were two areas where there was a lot of work that was something they could do. Many of the Kerrymen worked in quarries, in a slate quarry on Valentia Island, and they were skilled quarrymen. You know why the Kerrymen came here. We had quarries all over the place here. Many of the Cork and Waterford people had worked in quarries over in Waterford. And they came here ready to go in the quarries. A lot of the others who didn't go into the quarries went into the textile mills where they got work. So those were the two main areas where they got work. Some were farmers, some were fishermen, but most of the Downaville people worked in the quarries or the mills. And there's a story that was told by somebody, first-hand story, he actually observed it. He said it was an amazing thing to get up in the morning and to see the Lunch Pail Brigade come down the hill from Downaville, hundreds strong. The men headed for the quarries, and the women and the children headed for the textile mills. And they go all the way down the hill and across the river, and the quarrymen would go up to Granite Street and go to work, and the women and children would go off to the sides to the mills. And he said, and later in the afternoon, that brigade returned and marched back up that hill again. Now, I would like to talk, I was going to ask somebody from each of the three different clusters to talk today, but I didn't think we'd have enough time. So Barbara got off the hook. But Joe didn't. And Joe's going to tell you a little bit about his family, which came from the Kerry cluster.
Thanks, Larry.
And I will grab a little water. Yep.
Thanks. I'd like to tell you a little bit about one of the prominent Downaville families, James and Catherine Sullivan Murphy. They came to Pawcatuck from Valentia Island, County Kerry, with 5 of their 6 children. And Larry mentioned that there were quarries in Valentia Island, the slate quarries. Well, one of their children was actually killed in an accident in the quarry in Ireland. So only 5 of them actually emigrated to the United States. But these 5 children, Michael, Cornelius, Hannah, Mary, and John, had a total of 32 children. Okay. 10 from Michael and his wife, Margaret McCann. And they had hundreds of grandchildren and hundreds of great-grandchildren. Seriously. I mean, Jean Fiore on the Irish President's Committee and her brothers Don and Tom are descendants of Michael and Margaret Murphy. You know, that's part of her clan. Other surnames descended from Michael and Margaret through marriage into the Murphy family are, and these names you probably, some of you, I'm sure I'll recognize a lot of them. Kelleher, Collins, Dudois, Kavanaugh, Charnley, Chamberlain, Wasilewski, Spry, Zweer, Hennigan, Neville, Shea, Crowley, Zaremba, McGowan, Collins, Fiore, Keenan, Doyle, McCarthy, Edmonds, Krasinski, Skilling, and many others. 6 of the 32 were from Cornelius and his wife Joanna Rausch. Other surnames descended from Cornelius and Joanna were through marriage and into the family. St. Ange, Sullivan, Gleason, Penders, Pojanowski, McKenna, Slattery, and again, many others. 4 of the 32 were from Hannah and her husband, John Donahue. Hannah Murphy lived with her husband, John Donahue, and their family on Liberty Street in Downaville. My brothers and sister and I are descended from Hannah and John. we came off of that tree. And besides Donahue, other surnames and those through marriage into the Donahue family are Keegan, Lynch, Lathrop, Clark, Stute, Castle, Burlingame, McCarthy, Nunes, O'Brien, Lenny, and Anderson. And I said before, from the 32 grandchildren of James and Catherine Sullivan came hundreds of great-grandchildren and hundreds of great-great-grandchildren. I mean, financial planners talk about the power of compound interest. The Murphy family, like many of the early Irish, were the originators of the compounding concept. It's totally incredible to me that all these people are somehow related to the original couple, James and Catherine Murphy. I guess it all has to start somewhere. I'm forever grateful to Agnes McGowan for providing me with the details of descendants of the Murphy family. Immigrants sacrificed much while retaining and strengthening their religious cultural traditions. Their bond of faith and cultural perseverance through racial discrimination, religious intolerance, and sheer perseverance is what allowed the succeeding generation to exceed the previous generation's dreams. They had to persevere harsh racial discrimination and religious intolerance and persecution. These were the same hates that they had to endure in Ireland at the hands of the British, whose laws deprived Ireland's Catholics of their rights to worship, vote, speak their language, and own land, not to mention even having any access to food during the potato famine. A few years ago, my wife Deborah and I were lucky enough to go on a trip to Ireland at one of the bed and breakfasts on Valentia Island, where we stayed. I was asked what was my last name. Donahue, I said very proudly. And he said, "Oh," he says, "your people took the soup, did they?" I said, "Really?" He was a host of our bed and breakfast, and he asked me this question. And he said to me, "Oh, your people took the soup, did they?" I said, I had no idea what he meant by that. But his inflection indicated that it wasn't something that was very nice, you know. So I went ahead and I asked him, I said, "Well, what does that mean?" And he said, he explained that during the tyrannical rule of the British during the potato famine, the Protestants were given food by the British, but not the Irish Catholics, who were left to starve to death. Unless their name began with an O, like O'Donoghue, and they were willing to drop the O to convert to being Protestant. Then they could receive rations, hence they took the soup. I said, I had to admit, this guy really got under my skin, you know. I was like, that's a lot of malarkey. I said, I assure you there's no one in my family that took the soup. Okay. And then, but it does make me wonder if my family name did once have an O in it in the beginning. And, it's the old question, what came first, the chicken or the egg, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't let my family starve. Then again, I'm pretty sure I'm not going to become a Protestant. On a serious note, to get a sense of the severity of the famine, Ireland's population was nearly halved by the time the potato blight abated in 1852. Approximately 1 million people perished. Another 2 million abandoned their land, and half of those Irish sought new beginnings here in the United States.